Welcome back to another video, and this is another video in the object-oriented programming series. So we're doing the complete data structures algorithms bootcamp. You can find the links in the description. And in this video for object-oriented programming, we've already covered like almost everything in object-oriented programming. Just a few more things are remaining. And in this video, we're covering generics. So we're covering about like generics and stuff, and comparing objects and things like that. Also, one more important thing we'll be learning about is exception handling and object cloning and things like that. So exception handling is important. Especially in development with Java or any other like languages. You may have like seen it in Python or whatever, JavaScript. So that's what we'll learn about today. So let's start with generics, and this is actually a very nice thing we'll do, which will actually, we used array list, right? In the previous lectures, I told you about array lists. In this video, we'll actually create array list on our own. We'll actually make our own array list, right? How cool is that? So pretty cool. So array list is being provided to us. So we'll now actually create our own array list. We'll see how these things work internally. And after this, when we do advanced data structures, graphs and linked lists and stacks, queues or whatever, heaps and hash maps, we will create everything from scratch. We'll obviously use the one that Java provides, but we will also build it from scratch and see the internal working and how these things happen. Okay. So if you don't know what array lists are, check out obviously the arrays and array list video. We've already covered it, but let's get started. And before we move on to generics, we'll just go ahead and create our own array list. Okay, we know how array list works and everything. Now we just need to create our own array list using object-oriented programming. So let's see. So here I'm just going to say a new package. I'm going to say generics or something like that. And I'm going to say custom, new Java class. Is it recording? Yes. Custom array list, something like that. Okay. Public static void main. You know this array list class already provided to us in Java. Array list is equal to new array list, something like that, already provided to us. And then I can say list dot add, right? I can add something in it. I can say list dot remove or something like that, right? So I can do all these other things. One thing that array list is like, remove, can provide index number or something like this. Then I can say list dot something like, what else does it provide? Get. Okay. Then you say list dot what else? Set, index and object, something like that. And list dot what else can we make on our own? We can make anything. Clear is nothing, it's easy. Size, okay, is empty or something. We can make that also, no problem. So these are like a few examples of the functions, like the methods that Java list provides us. We'll try to make it on our own. Okay, we'll try to make all of these on our own. You can see that it's giving a little bit of warning over here. It's saying raw used of parameterized classed array list. We will see what this warning is, and then we'll learn about generics, how generics will solve this warning. First of all, let's just create a simple like array list. So internally array list works how? You can see where we keep on adding things in it, right? We keep on adding things in it, and at a particular time, when it gets full, it gets doubled. Okay, and then it copies all the items in the new one and then adds it. For example, if your array list has a size of 10, for example, and you insert 10 items in it, then you try to insert the 11th item, it will insert it. Outside you will see that it's inserted it. Internally what will happen? Internally it will make a new array of size 20, copy all the elements of size 10 inside that new array, and then insert the new element. This doubling happens very like when it doubles and doubles and doubles, so it grows exponentially. So it's like an amortized or on an average taking constant time only. You're like, Kunal, why is it taking constant time? Every time it's doubling, then copying. So it's not like taking constant time. It's like taking constant time on an average. Okay. If you just write it on pen and paper, if the size is first of all, let's say 10, then you insert 10 items, then you double it with 20. Okay. Then you double it 40, then you double it 80. So this doubling is happening at a very large scale. So on an average, when you take the time taken, it's actually linear. Okay, but I've covered like a little bit about this in the time complexity video and the array list video, so make sure to check it out. Amortize constant time. I'll obviously cover this in like hash maps and stuff as well. over there when we will cover in details about what are amortized constant time complexity. Okay, moving forward. So what do we need? Internally, let's say we'll store the stuff in an array only. Okay, now do we want the people to directly change this array? No, we only want them to change it via the methods that I just listed, get and set. So that's why when I create an array like this, int data, it will be of which type? Access modifier, private. You can't directly change it. You can only change it via methods and functions. It will also have, let's say, default size. So I can say int default size is, let's say, initially 10 or something like that. Okay, I can keep this as static because it's not going to be dependent on the object. And then I'm going to take an internal size of it as well. So I'm going to say private int size, initially it's 0. Initially it's 0. I'm going to create a constructor. I will not select anything, custom array list, and I'm going to say my data is equal to new integer of default size. You can say this dot data. Cool. Okay, so here we'll cover something like let's say I want to now create a normal one that is like add. Okay, you want to create an add method. So how would we create that? Obviously have to be public because I want to use it everywhere. Public add, going to have a void return type, and I'm just going to add a number over here. Okay, a number. But in array list, what happens is if the size of the array list is full, so I can say if is full, I'll create an is full. Okay, I can say this dot is full or whatever. It's basically going to say resize it. Okay, no need to write this obviously because I explained it in previous lecture, but it's a good convention. You can write it if you want. So when I resize it, what will I do? I will say data that I have of size, and then I want to increase the size as well. So I can say size plus plus, increase the index, and then like add the number. Just added the number. Now I just need to create these things, is full and resize. First I'll create is full, create method is full. So it's saying private boolean is full. What is full? Is full basically means that what does it mean? Is full basically means that the array is full, means size is equal to the length of this array. No problem. Return size is equal to data dot length. That's it. So you can see this is also maintaining the size. Okay, also maintaining the size. Initially when you insert, it will be like, hey, is this full? It's going to be like, no, it's not. Okay, insert at the 0th index, size will become 1. That's correct. When the item is inserted at 0th index, size is 1. No problem. Okay, only thing remaining now is how do we create this resize method. So alt enter, nope, not alt enter, control enter. How do I create it? Create it void resize. That's it. Okay, so I'll create a temporary array which is going to be of what? Double the size, data dot length multiplied by 2. Then I'm going to do what? Copy the current items in the new array. So I'm going to say for I 0 I data dot length and I plus plus. I'm going to say that my temporary arrays I is equal to my data of I. Cool. Sound good? And then I'm going to say that my new data is actually going to be equal to temp. Data is equal to. This is pretty simple stuff. Let me draw it on a whiteboard if you are confused. So what I'm doing is, let's say my array was of size 5. This is my original array. It's of size 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3, 4, 8, 1, 6, 7. Something like that. Okay. And then I have a temp array. So what I do is, okay, you want to insert now something like 17. It will be like, hey, this is full. It's going to be like, okay, create a new array of size 10. 8, 9, 10. Copy all these items here. 3, 4, 8, 1, 6, 7. And then what do? You say ARR is equal to, so initially what was happening was that ARR was pointing to this temp was pointing to this. Now you'll say ARR is equal to temp, like this data, this is actually data, main data. So then data is equal to temp, meaning data will now be pointing to this. That's it. And since you know when the function is over, this will go out of scope, hence it will be finished. But data is not inside the function. Data is actually outside the function. Data is like the instance variable, right? Here we have it. So this will only go out of the scope when the object is finished. Okay, so that's basically how it works, and that's it. Yeah, cool. What else is remaining? We can create a remove function. So you can say public remove basically means it will return the index value, or let's say it returns not the index value. No, index value does not make sense. Let's say it will return the value itself that is removed. So value is integer, and I'm just going to say remove. Cool. So here just going to say that int removed item is equal to what? Data of, just decrease the size by 1. That's it. Return removed. So you can see I'm not actually deleting the data. Okay, I'm just saying reduce the size by 1. Size is also working as an index value. Okay, also working as index value. So when I remove an item, as you can see over here in my whiteboard, when I say, okay, remove an item, so it will be like, okay, size minus minus, size will be over here. Then when you try to add a new item, it will override this, overwrite over this, it will replace this. Okay, when you try to print something, it will only go from 0 till size, even though 7 will be here, but it will not really print that. It will override it whenever you try to like, add new items in it. Okay, so that's about it. What else did we see that list contains? List also contains an obvious get, public, int, get, int index, right? Just return the item, data of index, that's it. What else does it contain? Size, public, int, size. Just gonna say return size. That's it. No problem over here. Cool. What else does it contain? It contains a set as well. Public, int, set, index value, and then the normal value. Okay, so I'm going to say data of index is equal to value. Set is actually not returning anything, so void. That's it. Now instead of doing this, I'm going to say custom array list. List is equal to new custom array list. List dot add 3. List dot add 5. List dot add 9 or something like that. Then I can just say print list. Obviously right now I'll just print it in an object way because toString is not modified, so we can override it, overridden. So you can override toString. That's it. Let's try to print it. Try to run this. This is something we already covered, overriding, right? toString method. Okay, so you can see it's of size 10 and we have only added 5, 3 and 9. Make sense? Sound good? When you add inside it 10 items, so when you add 10 items in it or 11 items, for I is equal to 0, I is less than, let's say 13 or 14, and I plus plus, it will actually double this into size 20. Actual size it's saying it's 3, so it's fooling us. Actual size it's saying 3, so size here is not equal to the size of the internal array, it's equal to how many data you have inserted. Okay, so I can say list dot add 2 into I or something, 2 into I or something like that. Now it will be like, okay, it will insert first 10 items, then it will double it, then it will add 4 items. Total size will be 20, but here it will only show us 13. Sorry, 14. Because it is going from 0 till 14. So last index it's going to is 13. So as you can see, actually in reality it has 20 items, but it's saying it's 14. So size basically means how many you have inserted. Now you can modify it yourself and just print it, just a simple for loop from 0 till size if you want, right? How hard would that be? That's it. Yeah, as simple as that. Cool. But what is the problem we might be facing over here right now? Let's see. So the problem we are facing over here is that by default internally it's an integer array. Okay, so the array list that you are creating can only store integers. Is that true for array list? No. You can store characters, you can store even custom data types, you can create an array list of student types, right? You can create an array list of strings as well, complex objects as well, integers, floats, booleans as well. Is it allowing us to do that? No, it's not. It's just saying that it's of type integer. That's it, right? So what would but internal array list provides this functionality. Internal array list is like array list. Here you can actually pass the type integer list is equal to new array list, list 2. This is now going to make sure that you are only able to add integer in it. If I add something like a string, it will give error. It's like, hey, your requirement is integer, you're passing a string. What is this functionality? Generics. This is known as generics. Okay, so generics help us in providing a type to like these values of integers and stuff. A parameterized type, if you will. A parameterized type. You can see it's a parameter of this particular instance, right, of this particular class, that only this class will have a particular type of objects. Which one is that? Integer type. Only integer type values will come in this. If I type string over here, then string values will be allowed. Okay, this is just like this should work. It's just like previous error. Oh, sorry, list 2 dot add this, but if you do integer, then it will give an error as well. Okay, but if you do string, then it won't give an error. So how do we make this type, this parameterized type that lets us choose what type of data to put in our custom classes or whatever, right? How do we do that? We do that via generics. So instead of just having a custom array list of integer, let's try to make it a custom array list of what? A custom array list of any single type that you want. Let's see. Okay, but before we move on to it, I want to share like some use cases. So here you can see that the problem that I'm facing is I'm only able to create integer elements or whatever. So my code is not being able to, like, I can't reuse this code for something like strings. Okay, so if you want to create an array list that contains strings, copy paste this entire thing and replace this with string. But that would be like making my code like duplicate so many times. Wouldn't it be cool if there was just like a template and I can provide the type like the internal Java array list provides? Okay, so that's the number one reason. It I can reuse my particular code sample for various data types and even the data types that I create. Point number one. Point number two is what? Point number two is that type safety. Okay, so if you have a list like this and let's say it's not generic like this, then anyone can add a string to it, it's allowing it. Anyone can add a number to it, it's allowing it. Anyone can add float in it, it's allowing that. Okay, but what if you just want the person to add a particular number only, a string only, a character only, or a boolean only? The type safety is missing. That is also helping. So if I just put the type safety over here, like I just showed you that if a string is available, then only string can be allowed. If an integer is available, then only integer will be allowed. You cannot add string or whatever. Okay, one thing I'd like to recommend here in this generic type, the one that we'll be making, you can only add classes over here. You can't add primitives. Primitives cannot be added like this. Okay, so cannot be of a primitive type. So you can replace this with an integer irrespectively like that. Okay, cool. So this is something like saying E. What is this E or whatever? Let's try to see how generics work. So working with generics is very simple. I'll actually just copy paste this custom array list, custom generic array list or something, or custom generic array list. Yeah, sure, no problem. What do we change? We actually have to do something like this. We actually have to provide the type over here. This is just a template, T for type, for example, or whatever. You can add anything. Now this is not supposed to be integer. It will be whatever I put over here. So t will be replaced. If I put integer over here, integer will be replaced, so on and so forth. Okay, default size will be integer, that's fine. This size will also be integer, that is also fine. And this is now not going, it's not going to be new int, it's going to be new t. Okay, it's going to be new t, but this is giving me an error. Okay, it's saying type parameter t cannot be instantiated directly like this. Why is it giving this error? Why are we getting this error? Let's see. So this is the Java documentation for generics. Highly recommend you to get used to reading documentations, at least if you want to do like development and stuff. Let's see what they are saying. So they're saying generics were introduced to Java to provide like the type check and whatever at compile time to support generic programming. Okay, so at compile time. So to implement generics, the Java compiler applies type erasure. What is type erasure? So it's saying that it applies it to like it basically in type erasure, it replaces all the type parameters in generic types with their bounds or object if the type parameters are unbounded. Okay, and the produced bytecode therefore contains only ordinary classes, interfaces, and methods. So at runtime, like it would be like, hey, like to ensure that no new classes are created for parameterized type, generics basically incur no runtime overhead. So over here, what is happening is that let me show you some other bound type parameters or whatever. So here, if you have something like this, let me just see. Okay, so in simple language, like what does this thing mean? Like it's not going to allow it at runtime or whatever. Okay, imagine if this was allowed. So it's saying that it's actually checking the type, like obviously it checks everything, like if it works and whatever during the compile time. Okay, and the actual object creation stuff that happens during the runtime. Now imagine you do something like this. You create something like return a type t or whatever. Here bytecode is basically going to contain something like with t, it's only going to it's not going to know like what is the value of t or whatever here. So when you create a new object like this, it's like, okay, what is t in bytecode? Because when the what actually happens at runtime, bytecode gets executed, but in bytecode, if you don't know what is the value of t, you're like, okay, what object do you want me to create for this? What is type t? I don't know, I have no idea. That's why you cannot create a type like an instance of generic type, because bytecode has no idea about it at runtime. So here you can see in the Java tutorial, I'll actually add it in my over here as well. So here you can see that you cannot instantiate generic types with primitive types, something I already told you, right? You cannot add primitives over here. You cannot create instances of type parameters. You can't do it. We know that every single object, every single class inherits the object class, right? So you can definitely have a workaround on this. You can add an object class over here. Okay, that is something you can do, or you can directly add a class object over here. Okay, a class type object. Then you can do something like, if I copy this and I paste this over here and I create a list or whatever, class C and something like that, this would work. Okay, but that is something not we're going to do. We are going to actually utilize the object class. Okay, that is something we're going to utilize. Let's see one more thing, like what happens is, like, so for example, you can see that whenever it's appending, it is passing the string class directly. So this is a little bit confusing. We won't be working on this. As you can see, it also says that you cannot declare static fields whose types are type parameters. For example, like this, a class is static field is obviously a class level variable, and it's all shared by all the non-static objects of the class. I've already mentioned this. We have covered in detail about this. Hence, the static field of type parameters are not allowed. Okay. So for example, is this case. Type parameters, static fields for these types of parameter like the generic, they are not allowed. Okay, so here you can see the static field, it's creating like for OS, it's saying it's an OS static field, and this is actually being shared by phone and pager and PC or whatever. Okay, so here it's saying it's 3 different types, and what is the type of OS then? Are you able to understand? This is static, means it does not depends on the objects, but these objects are of different types, and you know that this is going to be shared by all the objects. Now this OS is going to be of which type? Smartphone, pager, or tablet? Hence you cannot create static fields of type parameters. Okay, you can't use cast or instance of with parameterized type, right? So the instance of variable that I used, obviously you cannot use that because it works at runtime. Same explanation. So yeah, because this is used at runtime, and at runtime it will not have any information like what the generic type being used is. That's the main reason. This is something we already covered, and this is something we'll cover later on when we do exception handling and stuff. Okay, and you also cannot overload a method where the formal parameter type of each overloaded arrays to the same raw type. So for example, over here you can see that here you are seeing that there are two overloaded methods, for example. So after the type erasure, they're going to have like the same signature. Okay, so then it will give a compile time error, like, okay, which one do you want me to work with, right? So that's why won't be allowed. Okay, so the overloading over here for generic types is not allowed, because at compile time it will not have any information about that, about generics. So let's see how we can then do it. I'm going to be utilizing the object class, and let's see how we can make this work. So what I'm going to be doing is, instead of doing it like this, I'm going to say this is an object type. How did I get this idea? I checked the internal implementation of ArrayList. They're also using object type. Okay, object type, because object is like the biggest, right? Object is like the object type. It's like the class that is inherited by all the other classes. I told you this before. So I'm going to actually have it as an object type. Okay, and now I'm actually going to create an object type. No problem, right? Okay, here I actually created a test example, but I'll just remove it, and let's work with the previous class only. So I'll just add object over here. Okay, object type, and I'm just gonna now make a new object. No problem, that's fine. Integer, no, not an integer. I'm adding a type of t. Looks good. And then I'm just saying object type is equal to new object type, and then temp of I is equal to data of I, or whatever. Fine, looks good to me. It's just copying it, right? Yeah, that's fine. T is equal to new t. That's okay. Yep. If this thing is inside, like I can also cast it, by the way, something like this. Okay, here it's saying it's not really allowed because redundant. Okay, no worries. Cool. Other than that, I think this is where the cast thing will come in. T, type T, type T removed is equal to data. So it's saying, it's asking for T and you're giving it object. So here it was not really necessary, because in the object you are adding some new ones, like object one only. But here in the smaller type, more restrictive type, you're trying to add a bigger type. Okay, in this case, just cast it like that. Okay, here also it will be like integer value, that's correct, T. Something like that works. Size will be integer. T value is fine. In object you are typing the T, so that's not casting required, because in bigger one you're adding a smaller one, no required. Should be fine now. Yeah, let's try to see. So now let me just say custom generic array list of type integer list3 is equal to new custom generic array list. Let's say list3 dot add an integer 45. What if I try to add a string? Should give me an error. Yeah, we're getting an error. Okay, so we are able to create our own. For I is equal to 0, I is less than 14, I plus plus, list dot add 2 into I, or whatever, because I've created an integer. Now I just try to print it. Print list3. I'll just add a toString method over here, override toString. Oh, it already exists. Yeah, sure, replace it. Run. Hopefully it will work. List3 custom. All right, that works. Cool. Rest everything is 0. Sorry, null. Okay, size 14, size is also correct, everything is correct. Cool. That's how custom, like internal implementation of array is as well. It's taking object. Okay, since object is the main one, you can definitely cast and do the casting stuff on that. So if you are not aware of casting, please make sure you check out the previous videos. I did a detailed video on casting. It can really help you. That's it. Yeah. Generics. Okay. Now let's say you want, you can do some more things as well. You can also restrict this particular type. Okay. So you can say if this, something like over here you can see. Okay. So this is one more thing I want to tell you about, which is wildcards. Okay. So you can actually bound these wildcards to like restrict what type of items you can provide. Okay. What type of items you can provide. So let's see, like over here, it's saying that if I just say wildcard example, wildcard example. Okay, so if I talk about the integer one, integer class, okay, let's see. So it extends the class number. Okay, it extends the class number. What if I talk about float? That also extends number. So number is another class that contains so many other classes like integer and float and all these other things. So what if you want the type to be only number only? It can either be integer or float or whatever. How will you do that? Like this. You can add a question mark, extends the type that you want. So you can say something like extends the number class. Something like that. Okay. That's it. You can add a question mark if you want, but I'm just adding it like this. Now if you try to add, let's say, string over here, it's giving an error. Hey, like, hey, string is not a number. It should only be inside a number. Can you add number over here? Let's see. Yes. So you can add all the items, all the classes that are either number, the class that is number, you can add that, or all the classes that are subclasses of number. Here T should either be number or its subclasses. It's even more type checking now. Okay, that's just a little bit I wanted to share. Now it makes sure that you can only add numbers here. So you can create your own custom classes as well. It will only be able to add that custom class or its child classes. Okay, these are the wildcards. Okay, so basically the idea is that with wildcard, like this is just a little bit more type checking, but if you want to give a wildcard example, so I can say something like public void get list or something, and here you can say list of, let's say, a number, list of, let's say, a number, you can say list, and then here I can just say do something. Now here what will happen is when you pass a list over here, so here what will happen is you can see here you can only pass number type. You cannot pass the subclasses of number here. You can only pass number type. But if you want to pass the number type and the subclasses of it as well, then do this. Make sense? Now you can pass number. You can also pass integer and float and whatever. This is wildcard. This thing. Okay. Gonna remove this from here, but yeah, that's it. Let's move forward. Okay, now one more thing I want to show you how you can actually like compare objects. So for example, create a new package. Oh no, I'll just put it over here as well. A new I can just make it outside, no problem. Inside this only, okay, no problem. Package comparing, how we can compare. You should not compare yourself with others, but we are here comparing objects like for comparators, with comparators and stuff. Let's see. Java class, I'm gonna make something like simple student, very simple. It's gonna contain roll number and marks. Okay, that's it. Constructor, that's it, no problem. Okay, public static void main, and I can just say, or I can create a main. It does not really matter, but sure. Main public static void. I just want to make the code look more clean. So I'm going to say student Kunal is equal to new student, roll number 212, and marks I can say 89.76, float, something like that. Okay, similarly I can make Rahul Rahul's roll number is, let's say, 5, and his marks are, let's say, something like 99.756 or something, or 52, whatever. Okay, now I'm just going to say if Kunal is greater than Rahul, print Kunal has more marks. I can just say if Kunal is less than Rahul, I can say Rahul has more marks, something like that. Now this object actually has two types. Every single object over here has two things, roll number and marks. When I'm saying is Kunal less than Rahul, is this object less than this object? Java got confused. Java's like, dude, you have these two parameters. Which one do you want me to compare? You want me to compare this or this? I don't know. Error. Okay. So this is what's happening. In order to solve this problem, we have to implement comparable. So the actual class that does this thing, it's known as like comparable. It's not like a class. If we're implementing it, it's what? We've already covered this interface. Implements comparable. And you can see in comparable is what? You can see over here, interface, and interface can also have the generic types. Cool. This is now an example of interface with generic types. So here you can just see it's just an interface with generic types. That's it. This is it. Okay. So you want to create your own interface with generic type. Interface generic interface, something like this. So you can create it like this. Okay. That's it. Here you can say void display the value, something like that. Okay, then I can create a new class, implements what? Generic interface T. Here I would have to provide some generic, so obviously integer, let's say, for example. Okay, and obviously it is integer, so I will have to implement the methods like this. So you can see this is already replaced by whatever type was provided here. No problem. So this is how you can provide generic interfaces. But moving forward, here I would have to provide a type as well. With which type do you want to compare the student? So I'm going to compare every student with student type only, right? Obviously I would have to, oh, not here, sorry. Oh no, here only. Yeah, that's fine. And over here, now I'll just say, okay, if you are implementing an interface, it will contain some abstract methods. It says there's a compare to method. Okay, there's a compare to method, no problem. Let's do compare to, implement it, compare to. Now, whenever you run this thing, it's actually going to check for this. Okay, it's actually going to check for this. Cool. Sound good? So this is like not the convention way to do it. The convention way to do it now is using the compare to method. Okay, so I can say Kunal dot compare to Rahul, but this will return some value. Let's see what it will be. Never memorize anything. It's always given in the description. It says that it's taking some mod or something, no problem. It's giving the value between 0 and 1, like negative and positive and 0. So here it's saying that if x dot compare to y is greater than 0, I actually remember this. So basically it's like if this dot is returning an integer, right? So it basically means that difference, int difference is equal to this dot. I want to compare it with what? Now here I will provide it. Here I will say you want to compare it with roll number or marks. So I'll be like, okay, I want to compare it with marks. So this dot marks minus old dot marks. Okay, and then I'm just going to say return diff. Okay, I'm going to parse it in an integer, something like that. So here the idea is that basically if diff is equal to 0 means both are equal. If diff is less than 1 means O is bigger, else O is smaller. Let's check. So if Kunal this is giving me less than 0, okay, not less than 1, less than 0, negative. In that case, it will be like Rahul has more marks. Rahul does have more marks, so it should give me less than 0. It should print this. Rahul has more marks. What was the actual value? You can print that as well. Print the actual value. I think it's -1. -9. Okay. Some negative value or whatever. It's taking it taking a sigmoid or something. Okay. So never mind. So basically, in short, if you do x dot compare to y, if you do something like this, a dot compare to y, if it is giving negative over here, it means that this other object is bigger. If it's giving positive, it means that the current object from which you did the compare to means Kunal dot compare to. So Kunal is bigger. If both are equal, then it will be 0. Okay, that's it. That's how you can compare. All right, make sense? Let me show a really cool example for this. It's actually pretty nice. So let's say I actually create a few humans, right? I create a few fellows over here, and I can say some random stuff like this. Okay, Rahul, Arpit, I can say Karan, and I can say Sachin or whatever. Okay, 5 and then 2 and then 13 and then 9 or whatever. Marks here I can just add something random like 94, 95. Here I can say 77, and here I can say Karan was actually topper in my class, so never mind. And here I can say something like 96 or whatever. Okay, so here basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array of students. I'm going to say list of students. Okay, and I'm going to say this is a new list. It contains Kunal, Rahul, Arpit, Karan, and Sachin. Okay, and I'll just say print list, something like that. Okay, arrays dot toString list. So what I want to print. There's an arrays dot sort method as well. So I can say something like arrays dot sort list. Now it will get confused. Why? Let's see. It will not get confused because I've already created compare to, but if I hide this, over here you can see it's actually going to compare it with its I think 0th index. Yeah, let's try to check this thing. I'm gonna hide this and I'm gonna run this. So it should sort it based on the roll numbers. I think so. It's actually printed like to create a toString method over here as well. So I can create a toString. Yeah. So let's say I'm just printing students, just the roll number. Okay, just the roll number. Something like this. Run this. Let's see by default what will happen. So it actually, what did it do? It actually sorted it based on, I think, if I print marks, then I run this, then what will happen? Okay, it sorted it based on the marks. How come? Because I've added that over here. I've added that over here. But if I remove this, then let's see what will happen. marks plus, I can say, roll number. Now we'll actually be able to see both the things. And if I remove this, then let's see what will happen. Okay, so it gave an error, right? So it gave an error like, hey, what do you want me to compare it with? Roll number or marks? That's why compare to is required. Okay, cool. So that's what it will compare it with, like over here, marks. So you can see even it's running in compare to method. And when I actually run this thing, it will actually be like in compare to method. So it's actually checking it. Okay, it's actually checking. The arrays.sort is internally checking it like this. You can do it like inside this as well. Sort contains, I think, a parameter. You can actually add a comparator over here. So I can say a new comparator, and obviously now here you would have to provide the compare functionality. So you can say something like you want to compare it like with the student's marks. So let's say o1.marks minus o2.marks. Obviously cast it into an integer. Cool. So it's actually going to do like internal sorting algorithm, whatever it uses. So in order to check whether O1 is less than O2, if the item is negative, then it will do whatever it wants. If it is 0, then it is, and if it is not, then it will like, if this is giving positive, then it will basically just swap or whatever, right? So run this. Now it will sort actually according to marks. Okay, if you want to sort ascending order, so just replace this, or I can just add negative over here. Ascending order, this will be sorting, sorry, descending order. Now this will sort in descending order. Common sense. Descending order. That's it. Here it's saying that you can actually write it in a really simple manner as well. So you can actually use the lambda expressions, replace with lambda like this. Cool. So that's how you can do it, just replacing with lambda expression, because this itself, here I'm passing a function, right? So we know that in lambda we can replace it with functions. So arrow functions, lambda functions, right? Just type of, if you haven't learned about lambda functions, then we can do it right now, or I can do it in the next video, no worries. It's totally fine, I can do it in this video as well. So lambda functions, no problem. I can just add lambda functions. Okay, how lambda functions work? Public static void main. So you want to have, let's say, return type, name of the function is sum, you give it two numbers, int a comma int b, and that returns a plus b. So what are lambda functions? Lambda functions are inline functions, like one line functions. So when you have something that is only one line, you can replace it with the lambda function. Most of the time you don't actually need the name of the function or whatever. Like in this case, you can just, do you need the name of the function compare? No, you just need what it does, right? So how do I convert this into a lambda function? Very simple. I will say that okay, so something I can do over here is, let's say I have, let's say something like an integer array. Okay, I can say something like 3 4 5 2 1 or something. I can say array dot for something like this, or I can have a, no, this is a primitive array. So an object can be array list or something like that. Array list, something that takes an argument like as a function of integer is equal to new array list, and I can add this in it later on. Array list, that looks good. And then I can say array dot, I can say for I is equal to 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. I can say array dot add I, something like that. Okay, or I plus 1, whatever. Now I can say array dot for each. So for each actually takes a consumer type. What is this consumer type? Let's see. consumer type. So the consumer, it basically represents an operation that accepts a single input argument and results no results. Unlike most functional interfaces, consumer expected to operate via side effects. Okay, so here basically it says that it only takes one single type and returns no result. Okay, that's why it's void over here. So you can actually store lambda expressions in variables as well, because I told you that in lambda expression you don't really need, let's say, a name of the function. So for example, here you can say that, okay, for every item I'm actually parsing an inline function, a lambda function, or whatever. So here I'm basically going to say that for every item that you get, you want to do this thing. For every item you get, you want to do this thing. You want to do something like this. Print something like item into 2 or whatever. Okay, something like this, just one single line. That's it. I will just print the twice of every item. Okay, that's it. It's applying this on every single item. So this item basically represents every single element in the array list. For each does that only. See, it's just running a for loop. So what does the item represent? Every single item one by one. Then it's just printing that. So this is containing parameters, and this is containing what? This is containing the body of the function. Okay. You can actually store this in a consumer type as well, since it's taking consumer type. So I can do something like consumer type of, let's say, an integer. I'm going to say something, I can give it a name. I can say fun, something like this, copy paste. That's it. Now you can do arr dot for each. Instead of adding this entire thing, I can just say fun. Should work in the same way. Okay, so if you want to do something like, let's say you want to do something like with multiple parameters, for example, then you can just create an interface for that, right? So you can say interface function sum or something like that. Okay, so here you'll basically have what? Int sum. It takes two values, let's say int a comma int b. Okay, now here you can actually have a sum is equal to something like this. See what I did there? Something like this. Lambda function, it will actually say return just a plus b, and a b will be going over here. That's it. Yep. Can be replaced with a method reference. Integer contains sum, but no, I want to create more on my own. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is, Kunal, why are you storing this? I can take this as an operation, not a sum. It's going to be like general stuff. This is an operation of type sum. Okay, this is going to be just a little bit of it does not have to be sum. It has to be like something like I can take anything. I can say it can be of type a name, not sum, like some operation op operation or something like that. Okay, no problem. So now I can make many operations like this, sum, product. Okay, so it can be like product, it can be like subtraction, right? Something like this. Cool. So why am I storing this in an interface? Because this is also an interface. So I am actually making a type of consumer. It only takes one item and stuff like that. Here it's taking just one, I'm taking two. Okay, so I'm actually making a type of same thing. So lambda expression, in short, you can assign these to variables that are of type interfaces, because the implementation is provided here. That's it. Okay, so obviously one will be only available over here. If you make more than one, you'll get error. Okay, so just a simple trick to store your lambda functions. How do you call it? You can make a simple one. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to say it's going to be private and an integer, and it's going to be something like operation op. Okay, or it can be something like operate on this. Int a, int b. What do you want to do? I want to do operation op. That's it. So just going to say return op dot operation. a comma b. That's it. Pretty simple stuff. Now you can do as many operations as you want, right? So you can say this is in the class lambda functions. Lambda functions fun is equal to new lambda function. Fun is already created. My calculator or something like that. Okay, then I can say my calculator dot operate. Let's say I want to get 5 comma 3 and I want to get the sum of this, something like that. Okay, print something like this. Okay, print product of it, print subtraction of it. Let's try to run this. Okay, 8, 15 and 2. Makes sense? So here what is happening, it's going into operate. Operate is taking operation dot operation type dot operation a comma b. So dot operation is what? Dot operation whatever you have over here, and this is what? Abstract method. So it's actually going to go to its body, which is here. This is the body, this is the body, this is the body. That's it. We already covered about interfaces and how these things work, right? At runtime it decides like which one to, which particular body like it's executing, right? So that's it about lambda functions. Yeah, let's move. Okay, now let's learn about exception handling. So what are exceptions and things like that? Let's see. So there's a, people may have confusion between what is the difference between like an error or an exception, right? So error is basically like something that is caused due to some like say lack of resources or whatever. So for example, Stack Overflow, it's an error or an exception? Error. Okay, so Stack Overflow means out of the, the stack memory is full or whatever, out of the memory error or whatever like that. Exception is what? So error is basically non-recoverable. Okay, you cannot recover from an error, and the program cannot handle it. Like you cannot write code in order to handle it. Exception on the other hand, it's something that prevents the normal flow of the program. Something like dividing something by 0. That's arithmetic exception. Okay, you can't divide by 0. Something else can be something like null pointer exception in Java, right? You do null dot something error, null pointer exception. So you can recover from this. You can actually check for these things and program can handle it. And that is exactly what we're going to look into this lecture. So to talk about these errors and exceptions and all these other things, in Java, there's a class that handles all the exceptions and the errors. It is known as the throwable class. So we know the main class is object class. We have the object class here. It is inherited by throwable. Okay, now it has two as well. It has one called exceptions. Is it recording? Yes. And it had one called errors. Okay, so error can be something like whatever errors there might be. Okay, we're talking about exceptions. So exceptions are of two types: checked and not checked. Okay, so what is the difference? Not checked or unchecked, whatever. What is the difference between these two? Checked exceptions are the ones that are checked during the compile time. Okay, so if at the compile time you're getting some error, then it will give you an exception. If you're getting an exception at compile time, it will be a checked exception. So while the code is compiling, so for example, you're trying to open a file or whatever, and you try to give a file location and the file location does not exist, so it will give a file not found exception. Okay, something like that. Unchecked exception on the other hand is something that the compiler will not be able to detect. That will only be detected while the program is running. Something like divide by 0, 1. Okay, arithmetic exception. Cool. All right. So let's get started without with like how we can actually work with this in action. Let's see, and I also teach you how to create your own exceptions, right? Okay. So let's look into it. There are a few like keywords when it comes to exception handling in Java, and everything has its own like use case. So I'm just gonna make a new package here, exception handling. Oops, sorry, new package, exception handling. Okay, works. Need to rename it, no problem. So it's clear. Exception handling. Okay, just one single class. Here I have main. Okay, no problem. Cool. So public static void main. Here what we are going to do is, let's say there are a few keywords that we need to look into. So let's try to see what we. So I'm just going to basically create an exception over here. I can say int a is equal to something 5, int b is equal to 0, int c is equal to a divided by b or whatever. Okay, so here I'm just gonna run this and let's see what will happen. So it's given an exception. It displayed a message, says it's an exception of type arithmetic exception. So you can see it extends the runtime exception that I talked about, right? The runtime one and the checkable one. And this in itself extends exception. So you can see exception is the main class and these are like the subclasses for it. Okay, it has a runtime exception, and in runtime exception I have arithmetic exception. That's why it's printing some like divide by 0 message as well. If you want to print it in a pretty way, you can use the try catch block. You can say try this thing and catch an exception, something like you can say exception e, that's it, and you can say print e dot, there's a get message over here. The exception is a class, it has its own get message or whatever. So I can definitely write arithmetic exception over here as well, but I can write exception over here as well because exception is the main one. So let's see what it will happen if I write exception e, run this. It will just print get message, the message. It's saying divide by 0, it's just printing the message. Okay, arithmetic exception, same thing. So what is happening? This e will actually have an object over here. This catch will have whatever will be passed in this catch will actually be like what? E is equal to new arithmetic exception or whatever. So that's why I'm able to put exception over here. Remember in the previous section we did parent class being the type of the reference variable of the child class, and which method is going to run depends on the child class. Okay, so this one will be actually be run when of arithmetic exception, the message. Okay, that is basically about it. Try and catch. So these are the two new keywords that we learned. Try basically specifies that in the block, try all these things, but if anything happens badly, if some exception is thrown or whatever, you can catch it over here. Okay, there's one more called finally. Finally basically means no matter what happens, this will always execute. Sometimes you might want to close a file or whatever. So even if an exception is thrown or not thrown, it will always run. So exception was thrown, it ran. No exception thrown, it will still run. Okay, as simple as that. There are two more keywords that we need to address. So for example, if you had something like, int divide, int a comma int b or something like that. Okay, sorry, int a comma int b, right? And then just say return a divided by b, something like that. And here you say that you actually divide, static int divide, no problem. You can say I actually want to divide a with b. It's actually going to give me an error. Let's try to see what will happen. Okay, so it gave me an error or whatever like that. But what happens is that when you are throwing an error like this, so for example, you can say something like if let's say you want to say b is equal to 0, you don't want to like, you can say, otherwise just return a divided by b. But if b is equal to 0, you don't want to return a divided by b because you just want to throw an exception. So you can say throw an exception, throw arithmetic exception, something like that. Throw new arithmetic exception. Okay, that's it. Over here you can pass message as well. Please do not divide by 0. So explicitly when you want to throw something, you can do it like this. Okay, that's basically about it. And whenever you throw a new expression, you have to declare it over here as well. Throws what exception? Arithmetic exception. Like this. Okay, let's try to run this. Please do not divide by 0. So you're running this method. It's actually throwing a new arithmetic exception. It's catching a new arithmetic exception. If I just write exception over here, then also it will be the same thing because this is a subclass of it, right? So should be fine. Please do not divide by 0. So do you know now the difference between throw and throws, right? Throw basically means that we are throwing an exception. Throws is basically just used to declare exceptions. Okay, so it's just saying, hey, you're using divide, it may throw an exception. It may throw an exception. If you use this method, it may throw an exception. Something like that. Cool. Those are the 5 keywords. Try, catch, finally, throw, and throws. That's it. Okay, if I create another class over here, demo, say public static void main, then I can just say main.divide 3,4, something like that. Okay, so here also it will work, same thing. Run this thing. Okay, here it's giving an exception. Please do not divide by 0. Okay, makes sense. That's it. Yeah. Cool. Let's move forward then. Okay, so these are like the 5 ones. You can also add like multiple over here. So you can say catch a, let's say, arithmetic exception like this, and you can do one more, catch another, let's say, I'm just gonna copy paste this. You can catch another, you can say catch a normal exception, something like that. You can say something like normal exception or something or whatever. Okay, so here you can see that what is happening is that if an arithmetic exception is thrown, it will call this. If some other exception is thrown, it will call this in this order. Okay, but if you put it over here, then you can see it's giving an error. It's saying that it has already been caught. So why are you catching it again? Because exception includes everything. So more strict exceptions that you have to add those first. Make sense? Because if you put exception first only, then below calls will never execute. Because every single exception will come in this exception. So below ones will never execute. Okay, that's why the more strict rules should come above. If it's not dividing by 0, if it's just saying, you can just say try, you can just say something like throw exception just for fun. Throw new exception just for fun. Now it will be like, hey, it's actually throwing an exception. I'm just like mimicking an exception. Mimicking. I'm sorry, I don't know the spelling, but you get the idea. So I'm just saying, let's say for random, you are just throwing an exception, something just throws an exception. It's going to check, hey, is this an arithmetic exception? No, it's not. Then it's a normal exception. Something like that. I'm just trying to make you explain the order in which this runs. Okay, So let's say you want to create your own exceptions. I can say my exception, my exception, my exception. Okay, I want to give some rules. So obviously every single exception extends the main exception class, no problem, extends the exception class. And here I'm just going to say that it contains a constructor. Okay, my exception, it actually will give it a message, and I'm going to call my constructor, the main exception constructor that takes a message, this one. So I'm just going to say super, already learned about super, message, that's it. That's it. As simple as that. Cool. Now we can do something like this. I can say catch my exception. You want to catch my exception now. Exception.get message. So it's going to be like throw new my. So basically what I'm going to say is that string name, let's say you want to create your own exceptions, right? So you want to say, you want to basically throw an exception when something specific to you happens or whatever. Name is equal to Kunal. So I can say if name is equal to sorry, name dot equals, that's how we compare strings, Kunal, throw new my exception, name is Kunal, something like that. Okay, saying unwrap it, no problem, run it. It's now just going to say new my exception, name is Kunal. So my exception constructor is called, that itself calls the main constructor, this one. Okay, so now basically you are able to define your own constructors, your own exceptions as well. We'll do more of this, like your own exceptions, when we create classes in like linked list and stacks and queues and stuff, but this was generally about it. Okay, that's it. Yeah, everything that this is literally it. Yeah, and we'll do much more hands-on practice when we actually create data structures on our own. So yeah, let's move forward. Okay, one thing I'd like to share is obviously, like you already mentioned, I mentioned me multiple catch and try like catch you can have, how it executes the order and whatever. One thing I want to share is that the finally can only, it's optional, and it's like there can only be one finally block. You cannot create multiple. Doesn't make sense, right? So that's it. Okay, now one more thing I want to show you is something we've already done previously. It's object cloning, right? Something, let me show you. Cloning. So this is something we've done already before, but let me show you one thing. So I'm going to say class A or something, okay? Or I can create human. Let's make it like reasonable. Human class, no problem. Int age and string name, no problem. I can create a constructor that does not take anything. It just takes another human, other human. Okay, and then I can say this dot age is equal to the other human's age, and this dot name is equal to other human's name. Something we already covered before. Okay, this exact thing we did before also. Normal constructor also. This is something very simple. Main class, public static void main, human Kunal is equal to new human, and here I can pass what? Here I can pass name and age and name, no problem. I can say 34. I'm not 34, I'm just adding random numbers. Actually graduate next year, 2022. Anyway, and then I can say human twin is equal to new human. Here I'm going to pass the human object, something we've already done before. So here this one is going to call this one, and this line it's going to call a new human for this one. So I'm actually making a copy of Kunal. Now what is the problem in this? Now the problem is that it's taking a lot of processing time because we're using another new keyword. That's the thing that is happening over here. Instead, what we can do is we can use the clone method. So what is object cloning? So object cloning basically means, what are we doing here? We are creating an exact copy of a clone. Sorry, we are creating an exact copy of an object. That is what a clone means, right? So clone is actually a method in the object class that can be used to make these copies. Like I'm making a twin over here, right? That can be used to do it. Okay, and how can we do this? In Java, there's in the lang package, java.lang, we learned about packages in the previous lecture. There's an interface called clonable. So we must implement that by the class whose clone we want to create, obviously. Okay, cool. Sound good? That's it. So let's try to do it, and I'll then tell you like some advantages and stuff later on. So I'm gonna say it implements clonable. You already learned about interfaces, clonable, right? And here I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna say public type object, and I'm gonna say clone. Okay, this actually throws something known as clone not supported exception. Okay, return super.clone. So if I remove the exception, it's saying, hey, whatever you're trying to use over here, it actually throws some exception. So you have to specify. We already learned about throw versus throws. This is what it is. Okay, so whatever thing that you use, if that is throwing an exception inside some function, you have to mention it over here. Like, okay, this actually throws an exception. We've already covered this right now. Okay, that's it. It's pretty much about it. Now, if you want to make a clone of this, you can do something like, you can do something like, instead of this, you can do something like human twin is equal to Kunal.clone, and I'm just gonna parse it to human. Okay, it also throws an exception. So if you're using it, you have to mention it. Throws an exception. Okay, if something you're using inside a method throws an exception, you have to mention in the definition of this function that, okay, something is there inside this function that throws this exception. That's it. If I try to print now twin.age and twin.name, let's see what we get. Okay, so you can see both of these reference variables, twin and Kunal, will have the same value. So the clone will actually copy all the value from one object to another object. Okay, so we didn't have to write, like, we can obviously do it like this, but we didn't have to write it like this. Okay, this is like a lot of overhead with the new keyword. Okay, some of the advantages, like you don't have to write these lengthy codes like this. Okay, so just with like some one line of code, you can do it, no problem, and it's easier. So yeah, that's it. And also it's a faster way to copy it. So if you're making a clone of bigger objects like arrays and stuff, it's faster. Let's repeat. This is something that I should not repeat, already explained. This is something I should not repeat, already explained. This is something implements clonable. Clonable is an interface that we are implementing. Okay, that is it. And here it actually does not have anything, but here it's actually saying that super.clone. So we are actually adding clone not supported exception over here, because what will happen? Why are we adding clone not supported exception? Because if we don't implement the clonable interface, see what will happen. If we don't implement this, then it will generate a clone not supported exception. Hence we have to implement it. We have to implement clonable. Okay, so this is, in simple terms, if you want to clone an object for that class, you have to implement clonable. That's it. Something Java has provided us internally. Okay, so it's a bit faster and stuff, but some of the disadvantages are also available over here. So we have to change, like for example, we have to change a lot of syntax, had to add this and all these other things, right? So we have to implement the clonable interface. If we define this clone method and stuff like that, we have to handle this exception, and we have to call this this thing as well. The super.clone, you have to call this thing as well. Okay. So question you may ask, Kunal, this interface does not have any abstract methods in this, so why are you implementing this? Good question. The reason for that is it is a way to tell the JVM, Java Virtual Machine, that we have to just perform clone on our object of type human. Okay, so this is actually just telling the JVM that we are using clone in the object of type human. It's just telling the JVM that. Okay, and this object.clone is what? This is actually inside the object. Can I write override over here? Is it actually overriding? Yes, it is. It's actually overriding the one in object. Okay, sometimes you may want to just specify whether you want to allow it to be cloned or not. For that, you write this line over here, so that JVM knows that, okay, it's allowed to clone this. Okay, so this is actually doing shallow copy of the object. Let's learn about like shallow and deep copy, and that's it. Okay, so what we mean by that is, let's say it has something like this. Let's say it also has something like an integer array or something, ARR. Okay, and there I can say this dot array is equal to new int 5. Okay, something like this, no problem. Or I can just add something. I can say 3 4 5 6 9 1 or whatever, new int, like that. Okay, so that looks good, and this is something basically I don't want now. I'm using it for this, so even if I run it like this, should work fine. Okay, 34 Kunal Kushwaha or whatever. And now basically I'm going to remove this. I don't need this. And basically what I want to do is, it's creating an exact copy. So all these things will be copied. So if I just try to say print arrays dot toString, twin dot array, let's try to see what it will print. Okay, so it's printing this. Now if I do something like this, I say twin dot array is actually equal to, sorry, twin dot array's 0th item is actually equal to 100. Now if I try to print this, what will happen? Obviously twin dot array, this will be modified, but what if I try to print Kunal dot ARR? What will happen? Kunal dot ARR also changed. What is happening? This is shallow copy. This is shallow copy. So what is happening? Let me explain. Shallow copy here means basically this. Let me bring my whiteboard and then explain to you. So shallow copy means this. So for example, Kunal object, there was a Kunal object like this. Okay, it had something like, let's say age is equal to 34, name is equal to what? Kunal Kushwaha, and array is equal to something like, what was it? 3 4 5 6 9 1. So when I did the Kunal.clone using the clone method or whatever things we did, it actually did shallow copy. What is shallow copy? Shallow copy means it will create another twin. It will make copy only. It will create another twin. It will create new variables like this for primitives. So here we need to consider two things. For primitives, so it will have age is equal to 34, name is equal to like exactly copy this like this, Kunal Kushwaha or whatever. But like for these objects, not for primitives. For primitives, it's creating a new copy, like a new variable, and it will copy this. But for primitives, what it's doing, it's actually not going to create a new one. It will point to this only. This reference variable will point to this only. That is what's happening. Okay. So primitives, it's making a new one, but for non-primitives, string is also not primitive. It's actually pointing to the previous one. Let me just create a new color. So it's actually going to point to this. This is going to point to this object. That's it. You make a change via this, it will be reflected in the original one. Is this really like the pure copy of the object? No. That's why it's known as shallow copy. So in simple terms, what is shallow copy? Primitives will be copied as it is, but the reference variable, like if you are creating like a copy of an object and it itself contains some other object type, that object type's value will not be copied. It will not be copied, but it will just point to the same object. The reference variable will point to the same object internally. Make sense? Sound good? This is what is shallow copy. That your object, main object whose copy you are creating, inside that object, if there are some other objects, then the new object, the copy of the object that you have created, inside that copy, the value for those objects will not be like a new, it will not create a new array and put it over here. No, it will actually just point to the one in the original object whose copy you are creating. That's why a change through this is actually resulting in change in the original object. This is known as shallow copy. So in order to solve this problem, we can do something known as deep copy. Deep copy basically means, okay, if the object itself contains some other object, don't like point it to that only, actually create a copy of that object itself. Okay, so this is shallow copy. Okay, deep means something like this. Deep means this. Deep copy. Kunal is equal to, age is equal to 34, name is equal to Kunal Kushwaha, array is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then twin is going to be equal to, okay, primitive, just copy as it is, create a new one. This is these are two objects. Okay, I will not like point it to the same object, I'll create a same copy of a new object. Array is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are now two different objects. When you make a change on this ARR, it will not be reflected in this because they're different objects. That's it. Simple stuff. We've already covered objects a lot in Java, so it should not be a problem. Okay, let's move forward and see how we can implement it. So here in my whiteboard, I can basically say that if I'm making a deep copy of this thing, so let's see how we can make that. So a deep copy will be something like this. I'm gonna have to use the clone method only, but let's see. Using the clone method, I'm just gonna say this is shallow copy. I'm gonna hide this. So I'm gonna use the clone method only. It's actually creating a new, I'm gonna create a new object type of it. So the object type is what? Human. So this is deep copy. Let's make deep copy. So deep copy is going to be what? Human type, oops. Human type twin is equal to what? Human and super.clone. Okay, something like that. This is actually shallow copy. This is actually shallow copy. Okay, now what do I want to do? Now I want to make a deep copy. Whatever reference variables you are reusing, I don't want you to use that. I want you to use, I want you to have like a new one. Okay, so here basically what are we going to do? I'm just going to say that my array that I have over here, right? My array that I have over here. So I'm just going to say that twin dot array, I'm going to create a new array. Okay, new array or something. No, something like that. It actually contains what? It actually contains a new int only. New int twin dot array dot length or whatever. Okay, so it's actually creating a new array now. Now basically what I want to do is I want to say that twin dot array is actually going to be equal to what? Like the every single internal element that I want to change. Okay, so I want to say that for I is equal to 0, y is less than twin dot array dot length. I can say twin dot array of I is equal to this dot array of I. Okay, then I can say return enhanced. Okay, you can do enhanced for loop system array dot copy, system dot array copy is available, but no problem. Okay, let's try to use this now. How we can do now the deep copy part. So here if I just print it, you can see it did not change A. It did not change Kunal now. Okay. Twin would be changed, but Kunal would not be changed. Kunal will remain as it is. Twin would change. Twin changed, Kunal did not change. Okay. So it created actually a new copy. Okay. It created a clone and it said, okay, in the clone, I know that in the twin that I have, the array in that is actually pointing to the same. So I don't want to point it to the same. I want to create a new array. Okay. Sound good? And then here we have for every single, this is going to be obviously empty. Then it's going to be like, hey, for every single element, just copy the current project, this represents what? Current object, right? So this means what? Current object, Kunal. Kunal dot clones this means Kunal. Right? This is something I've already explained. If you're not aware of this, make sure you check it out. That's it. Yeah. Cool. That was deep copy. So learned a lot of nice things, and that's pretty much about it. And yeah, in the next video we'll be doing like collections framework and stuff, vector and enums and all these other things. Then we'll start with linked lists and all these other things. So make sure you like, comment, and join the Learning in Public initiative. Link is in the description. Notes and everything are already uploaded, and yeah, we're now excited to start with like complex data structures and interview problems for like companies like Google, Facebook, not Facebook, like Meta, Amazon and stuff. So this is the only data structure bootcamp, an interview preparation bootcamp that you need in order to crack interviews. So we'll cover definitely everything, and I'll share my personal tips that led me to clear these interviews as well. And yeah, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below if you loved it, and show the support, so that if you comment, then it will be easier for people to find the course, right? And their money would be saved. So make sure you comment, and I will see you in the next one. Please comment and like. I would highly appreciate it. And yeah, see you later.